All right, guys, part 2. This is going to be awesome because of the fact this is where you guys get to see it all come together and you get to see the final product. And I'm really proud of how this turned out. Now, I don't know how much you've been following along or how much you've been noticing, but I really took the time to put all the materials together for this. I didn't just go out and take and say, oh, I want, maple on the top. I went out and I checked the lumber store over and over and over again for the right pieces of maple so everything would look just right. Anyways, let's get to it. Part 2. Go. A quick recap, I had a failure, a big failure. What was that failure? Basically, I got to the point where I had these hinges installed and it wasn't clearing the board over here, which I believe I just showed you. And you would have thought that these would have cleared because when you look at them in the store, their movement, it's a little deceiving, but they don't clear regardless, and that's because they're made for 3/4 inch wood. And I decided I'd look at trying to make my own. I tried some that were like a hood, I tried some scissor concepts, and I just couldn't get something that worked the way I wanted. I'm sure somebody will know where you can easily find ones that are available, but I don't know. I started looking at some sauce ones that would be able to connect with the ones over here, but they were expensive and it would be a long wait time. So what I ended up coming up with is something on this concept, where this is going to be the board that's going to lay here, and it's going to be connected with this one, and it's going to move up and out like that. And these are available at your local Lowe's or whatever. They're just for cabinets, so they should work good. And it's using it a little bit unintended, but it should work just fine. The one downside is I'm going to have to cut a little slot here, but it should work great, and it also might help out for another concept that I have here. Now I'm going to get the holes drilled for them, get them mounted in place, and we'll go from there. I like the past me. He made it sound so simple. He didn't spend, 2.5 weeks making stuff like this, thinking he could make his own hinges. All right, moving on. So now I got to get rid of those holes that I had put there for the hinges, and I figured the best way is just going to be to cut some off and then fill it in with a board. I also did really like how it adds some structure to it as well. So in the end, it was kind of probably a good thing, but before I forget to mention it, I did have to take and cover these up, and I figured the best way was to take and cut this down so that way it's thinner, then take and plane down a piece of board that would take and fit in here nicely, and I believe it's not going to take too much from the effect. I would have loved to have stuck a dowel in there, but I thought it'd look kind of funny having that piece of dowel in there, and this would be hidden a little more. I had the clamps here because of the fact that the glue is still a little bit wet, and I don't want this piece to rip off. My biggest fear is that I'm going to blow out on this side. This side's fine because I'm planning to cut that anyways, but this side I don't want to go out on. And the reason why it's a big debate is because it's something I'm not good at. Sometimes I build to expand my limitations, and sometimes I build recognizing my own limitations. I'm gonna have to cut those off as the board that it goes to. I don't want to have to drill holes into it. I'm sanding down part of this hinge, and that's so that way as you look at the table from the top, you're not able to actually see it as well. Right now I'm picking the pieces of wood that I like the best as far as design, trying to keep those. This is already milled down to 3/4 inch and it still has a lot of flaws in it. That's the type of wood that I can get around here for kind of a reasonable price. So I'm gonna have to plan it is gonna end up to be undersized. I'm gonna have to work with that, but I've already had all that planned out for a few stages, thankfully. So yeah, I'm just gonna cut it up and keep the good parts and try to get it as nice as possible. I'm putting a slight angle on the drawers so that way they don't interfere with each other. This is the cedar I decided to use, and from my experience with it in the past, it's best to get a clear coat on it right away to help preserve some of the color. I'm going to have this top piece actually go underneath a little ledge in here, and that'll give you also some room to expand and contract. So I just got to trim this mount out, and then I'm going to put the trim on because that's going to help me set up for everything else. So real quick, I just wanted to check, does any other maker sit there and go about their build and then all of a sudden they have to spend like 20 minutes looking for their favorite pencil? Yeah. Anyways. When you open this drawer, it's going to unlock a pin in order to open the center up. So I'll open this, which unlocks it. So then you can pull this open. Now I'm going to close the drawer so you can see that pin moving. And that fits right in here. So now I got to make that part, and this one actually ended up failing. You see these nail marks that I'm putting in here? I thought it'd be covered up with trim, and when I tried that it didn't want to fit right, so I ended up redoing it. I know some of you like to see my failures, but sometimes it makes the video too long, so I'll just tell you about it. This area is just too hard for videoing, so I'm going to take and basically drill a hole out to 10 mil, put a dowel rod in here, have a string that stops it from coming out too far. It just needs to come out far enough to get out of the piece that's on the other side that I showed you. And on this side I'm going to put a magnet. I'll get it done and I'll show you. So here's how this works. This is the back side of the drawer. I put a magnet back here, and this is a little pin. It's got a screw in it, so that way it'll be attracted to the magnet and a little string to stop it. So when you go to open it, pulls that out, which as you can see on this side, pulls it out. That's going to relieve it from the hole, allowing this part to pull out. It's not the most elegant solution, but to be fair, I think I've blown out half my brain cells with this year's pollen bloom, so it'll have to do. And I think it'll be robust, pretty fail-proof. Not really. My friend's a little bit of a klutz. He broke it in the first month, but that's alright, he fixed it too. As well, right here, there's a stash. Now in the video, I don't show putting this felt in here, but I ended up doing this because I just couldn't stand how ugly it was, and that made it look a lot nicer. And that's held in with a little magnet there. Now I got to make that cubby and the locking mechanisms. The cedar I used was tongue and groove, so that's why it was able to slide up and down like that. So I'll admit this is probably the biggest fail about the whole table. I thought this was going to turn out much better than it did, and I did clean it up pretty good in the end, but I just feel like I could have done better to begin with. Thank you, honey, for the center drill. Now what this bracket is going to do is it's going to basically hold underneath the other board that locks in place, effectively keeping this one also locked down. And then I drilled holes to put some magnets in it, and this way it would hold them together and not leave a gap when they expanded and contracted or got moved around. I thought this was a pretty neat way to solve a problem I had. And here's what that looks like when it pulls together. I'm modifying these brackets so that way I have some hooks to go on the boards, so that way they hook on and don't come out. It'll make sense with the next clips. Here you can see I attached that clip on the bottom side of the board, and I want you to keep an eye on it because you'll see how it goes on. On the inside here, I've attached some screws, and then the board simply goes on with those clips and snaps into place. And then it's held on the one side with screws, and then it's under the trim on the other side. And then this piece comes in and it clips on there, and then those one pieces that I had showed you that go under the other board hold it from coming out. So what I got going on here is these little tabs which help just kind of hook underneath this. And then this is able to expand inside of the trim over here. However, I want to stay in contact with this as much as possible. So I got these magnets here to pull them together here, and then let this side float inside of here. And then I got the clips underneath so that way these just don't come right out. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to put a piece of plywood underneath here because this is all actually going to be a hiding spot as well. As you may have seen, I'm not sure. At this point, this has gotten so long, it's starting to get fuzzy. With it open, if we give it a little jar, each side has a stash. Now, in order to get this open, you have to figure out how to use this, because right now it's locked. And that is by putting this here, sliding it over, and now it opens. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about what happened. Basically, this is a locking mechanism. This is going to slide behind here to open it, but right now it's locked. So he'll have to use a magnet to slide this over, and then he'll be able to go up. And I have to carve a little bit more out here, which is a little unexpected, but it'll be all right. So for the side cupboards, I needed some doors, and there's not much to explain here, so we're just going to do a nice little time lapse. Alright, so kind of keeping with theme, from here it's going to be just siding. So we're going to keep with the build montage, and we'll see you at the finish line. Alright guys, it's been a long journey, but let's check it out. Alright guys, I really love how this turned out. I love the challenge behind it. Doing a bigger project is always nice, but it's also harder to film it and everything else. It's been a new road for me because all that added layers to it. Also, even when it comes to editing, my style of videos have changed, but yet I videoed this a while ago and now I'm trying to edit it with a new style. So it's been a challenge, but I've appreciated every bit of it. I love how it turned out. And yeah, until next time, keep creating.